Hey everybody, welcome to this week's news roundup. Hopefully this time I will remember to save my recordings and I won't have to do this a second time like I'm doing right now. But, a little peek behind the magic here of how I was really excited about wow, I really blew through all of this and I got it all taken care of and I got all my recordings done and it's kind of early. And maybe I could go inside and get to, read a little bit. But no, I forgot to save all of my fucking recordings for some reason. I don't even know. I'm not even stoned. I'm just an idiot. So that's kind of where we're at here. Let's just go ahead and jump into the news, I suppose. The big thing right now, obviously, is the Israel and Palestine are back at it again. Hamas did a very impressive, honestly, infiltration into Israel using gliders. Not quite technicals, because no guns were attached to them. The guys were just carrying the guns. But I really feel like we're seeing a era of low-tech warfare that's we never thought was possible. Americans, we've always just more and more tech, but Ukraine has taught us that you can just attach a fucking mortar bomb to an off-the-shelf drone and fly it over a tank, and there's not really a whole lot that anybody can do about that. Put your little coke cage up and pray for it to be quick. But I haven't really posted a whole lot on Twitter about any of the conflict happening because, I don't know how much of the stuff I can really trust that's out there. I believe Wall Street Journal put out an article saying that Iran was part of it and gave the green light and the okay. And all of the U.S. intelligence services are like, I don't know. We don't know that. That's not a thing we're claiming. We don't know any of that. And then also there was a lot being shared of the Taliban requesting the ability to go through fellow Muslim lands so they could go fight Israel with Hezbollah and Hamas, which came from the Taliban public affairs, public relations Twitter account, which is a parody account. So there's just a lot of, Twitter's just full of a lot of misinformation and a lot of people screaming at each other. And it's not healthy for anybody. It's not helpful. You're not doing anything worthwhile by doing this. But, as I said, I have not posted very much about it, but I do know myself, and I don't want to speak for Nate, completely, but I believe that he would agree. We do stand with solidarity with, the people of Palestine. It's hard. It's got to be hard to live in an open air cage and have your shit taken from you constantly. No American would put up with the way that the people in Palestine are being treated, at all. No one would be like, oh, I went to church and I came back and somebody else was living in my house, and that's legal. And if I try to do anything about it, I will just be shot and nobody will give a fuck. That is the reality that a lot of people in Palestine live under. Obviously the power imbalance is there as well. Israel has the support of the United States. Funding, it has all kinds of, power and, technology to use against these people. And they've already, whacked a whole bunch of fucking civilians, women and children. At the same time, Hamas's original push in killed a lot of civilians too. So don't kill civilians. That's number one. Those are war crimes. Don't do those things. I'm not going to get into the semantics of who is or isn't a colonizer or whatever. If you land somewhere and there's a bunch of people who do not have guns and are not a military group, do not massacre them. Step one. Okay? I think we can all agree with that. But at the same time, I understand why I understand why Hamas would do this. I understand because they're getting themselves squeezed out of their own lands. They get their shit taken from them. They get treated like animals and called animals. You can only be dehumanized so long. You can only be slapped so many times before you bite back. And there should be no qualm with oh yeah, of course they're fighting back against this oppressor group. And that's not anti-Semitic. There's nothing wrong with saying that. it is very true. Now, when we get to the reading portion, I did find a lot of articles that were pro-Palestinian during the Vietnam War. The left, the military anti-war left, has always been very pro-Palestine. Because again, Israel is it's an extension of the American war machine. Let's be honest. Like it's the Middle Eastern projection of violence that America has. We fund it and we give it weapons and we give them money, and we don't really say too much about how they use those things. So, enough said about that. I don't want to get too far into it. Oh, but with the I didn't read any of the things from those articles for a couple of reasons. One, the language being used is a little different than language that is used today. That is not meant to be anti-Semitic. I just don't want to sit down and read and have to say out loud the word Zionist a whole bunch, because that just doesn't feel good. And I understand whatever argument you have. I don't give a shit. I'm not comfortable with it, so I'm not going to do it. But I do want to, and also they're very angry. Like they're a lot angrier than most of the other anti-war stuff. So I understand why it's angrier, because people see that force being projected onto an oppressed minority. Nobody wants to be a part of that when you're an anti-war leftist. If you're a fascist, you love it, but in theory, these people are not. So it's I don't want to put too much into it. I didn't want to read any of those because I don't want to add to a whole lot of kind of the rhetoric that's out there right now. But I did want to give at least, look, if anybody's like, well, Francis has never talked about it because he doesn't post about it on Twitter. Here it is. I posted it on YouTube. 350 of you will listen to it. And I at least have covered my bases on why I don't want to post angry shit all the time online. So, moving on. Hawley threatens another nomination block over Fort Leonard Wood. So, Josh Howley, my Missouri senator, a man who raised his fist to January 6th protesters before they went and did all the violence. After the violence, he was running away from them because he probably would have been fine, honestly. But nobody wants to get caught in the middle of a bunch of angry rednecks with guns ever, unless it's angry rednecks with guns heading out to the gun range. That can be fun. But in the Capitol, not so much. It's not a great place for anybody. So Josh Howley is threatening a nomination block, much like Tommy Tuberville is kind of what they call out. But the meat of this is not that he's mad about abortion. He wants the government, or he wants there to be $40 million worth of infrastructure funding done for the troops, for the it says for housing. It doesn't specifically call anything out. It doesn't say, because the barracks are moldy and shitty or anything like that. But it does say, look, the troops need better places to live. Is Josh Howley doing this to win over some military votes? Maybe. Does he actually care about the troops? I don't know. I don't really think so. I generally don't think any politician gives a fuck about the troops outside of it being a political chess piece. And certainly one of the largest military bases that the Army has being in his jurisdiction is a big reason to want to do some stuff for those guys. So, but Howley has always kind of been like this, where he spends nine times out of 10, he's a big shithead, but that one time he does something that, even if it's for self-serving reasons, even if in the end it was just to promote himself, it actually did something decent. So we're going to let it slide. There was an apartment complex that was really close to me, and it was really run down. The owners of it were not taking care of it. They weren't getting the trash taken. The trash wasn't even being taken out. The dumpsters weren't being unloaded. Howley went down there and he got eyes on it, and he went and it looks great now. I don't know specifically what he did, but I know that he had a lot to do with look, we need to do something to make sure that things like this don't happen, because these people deserve a good place to live. So, on occasion, he can do some right. it's leaves a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth to have to admit that, and I know that he's trying to go over this whole populist idea, which sure that would be great if you were also a fascist at the same time. So that's really kind of separating the two. It's like, oh, he did something nice. Unfortunately, he's still a huge piece of shit, and he looks like a tent revivalist preacher. I'm not into it. I don't like it. All right, last one. Army Basic Leader course will soon be longer and have graded land navigation. So, rest in peace to our officer corps, I guess. You will now be graded and have to pass land nav to get out. I personally have done land navigation. I've been trained in land navigation over my 20-year career. I want to say maybe 5 or 6 times. Basic training. Iraq, Afghanistan, the pre-mobilizations. Actually, before Afghanistan, I don't think we did. I had a week training. They didn't even teach me how to shoot my gun. They gave me a 9mm pistol. Had never shot a pistol before. They're go qualify on it. Took me 4 times. No idea what I was doing with the pistol. But I got it eventually. I suppose. Thankfully, nobody asked me to do war in Afghanistan. And then when I went to Iraq, they gave me an actual rifle. I know what to do with a rifle. I'm still shit with a pistol, so I stick with it. But the Army land navigation is not we joke about it being hard. It's not hard. It just has a lot of steps. And a lot of steps that if you miss one, you'll kind of fuck yourself up. I've always been really good at land navigation, but only in that time period of all right, we sat you down with the map. We gave you the protractor, the compass. We taught you how to shoot the azimuth and do the thing. Magnetic north versus true north. Here's how to do the calculations for that. Great, perfect. I can do land nav. I'm good. And then 2 weeks later, I will completely forget how to do all of it because who the fuck land navs? It would be can you pilot this ship by the stars? Probably. If you gave me the training, and because I know star charts change and everything like that, I know that there's a lot of difference in things and how difficult it is. And it was doable. They did it. Not great. Not as great as we can do it now, but they were able to navigate via star charts. So we kind of have something similar here where there's just yes, we should probably teach people how to do it. It would be a good idea, but has it been used? Outside of special forces, I do think that special forces might probably still pull, but even that now they carry GPS. GPS is everywhere now. There's nowhere that you can't get a satellite to zap you. So I don't know. I don't even know if land navigation is useful. We definitely should teach it. It will always be one of my I had to learn it, so you have to learn it. There's a lot of things that I feel you can drop off. You don't have to do those things. But land navigation, you should learn land navigation. Not just because I like to see officers suffer, but I do believe that also it gives you a good idea of you will understand terrain a lot better after doing land navigation. You will understand moving over terrain and navigating around things, over things, or through things, whether on foot or mechanized or anything like that, or just in your own daily life. Just knowing hills and valleys and draws and how to get from one place to another. Yes, you would end up using you'll end up using your GPS, but personally, I generally know my east and west all over St. Louis because I know where the river is. If I know where the river is, I know north, south, east, west. And so landmarks like that, without land navigation, maybe I wouldn't have picked something like that up because it does teach you how to do those things. I don't know. But also officers must suffer. So highly recommend continuing to do that to make them all suffer. So that's the news. Let's go ahead and go over into the media. All right, so here's what I've been consuming this week, media-wise. Though I did have a very nice stir-fry with some leftover pork steak today. Let's start with my TV. Loki is back on TV. I do not really watch a whole lot of the Marvel stuff. I have been enjoying Loki. I like Tom Hiddleston. I like a tall skinny guy doing tall skinny guy stuff. I don't know, like skinny guy, put him in a skinny tie, put him in a little skinny shirt and everything. He's very funny. I love his wardrobe throughout the entire thing, including like this little like bralette that he's wearing, but it's just like a scabbard for a sword that he does not have like at all, but he's got to keep it on because he's got to define those shoulders up a little bit, you know. I've been enjoying it. My daughter she watched the first episode and she's like, oh, the bad guy, that's, spoiler alert, that's a Mortis. No idea who that is myself, but because she reads a whole bunch of comics, she went and got her Marvel encyclopedia and just flipped through and was like, yeah, here it is. It's this guy. And I looked it up and for sure, like that's what everybody's like, oh no, yeah, it's this time guy, who's the bad guy during this one probably. So, she called it. I'm not going to say very surprised, because she retains a lot of information like that. She does love comic books. She really does like the superhero stuff too, which I'm not really into myself. I did not read comics when I was younger because I did not, I guess, know that comics were not just superhero things, that comics also had, you know, there's graphic novels of novels that are already written. There's graphic novels of all kinds of different things that are not superheroes. So I've been enjoying this. I really like Quan. They got Quan here from it's Data and from Goonies, and Short Round from Indiana Jones. Of course, those are the only things that he's also an Academy Award winner. He's very good at what he does. So, and he's very good in here too. But I got really excited seeing him in there, and apparently he was really excited to be in the Marvel universe himself. So, I like it. My daughter likes it. We kind of started watching the Marvel movies. She is not really super into them, but she likes Loki. So maybe I think it's the shorter format. Like I really like. I dislike 3 hour long movies. Don't do that shit to me. Make your movie like 2 hours. Legally, nobody can go beyond 2 hours, like including credits. Just done. 2 hours. You hit that mark. The last bit of the credits better be rolling. Anything beyond that, break it up into a limited series run somewhere. Don't stop trying to force me to sit through 2.5 hours now, or 3.5 hours. Now, I'm going to say that. However, Ridley Scott, please give me the 4.5 hour Napoleon cut. I absolutely need that. I will watch that at home, not in a theater though, where I can pause and go to the bathroom. But speaking of graphic novels, I did discover the Animorphs. I did not read the Animorphs when I was a kid, because, let's be honest, this whole thing really kind of threw... It's 1990s Photoshop, but like I always looked at it and I saw this and I was like, this looks like the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I did not know that this was like an interstellar war where children were getting PTSD. I would have absolutely read them if I knew that's what was going on. So instead, we have the graphic novels. There's 4 of them so far. 5th one coming out next year. I've read 3 of them. I'm in the middle of the 4th one. Graphic novels have kind of become how I like to consume my young adult media. Like if there's a book that there's all these teen young adult fiction books, and some of them are fine. I really liked Lockwood and Company. I enjoyed reading those, but some of them are very basic and very like they're written for kids. It's not for me. I'm 40 years old. I have mature tastes. I read Stalingrad shit, I guess. But anyway, the way that it's written is in a lot more basic of a tone, and that just gets very boring to me. So I really like having these graphic novels. Now I will probably go, and after I finish up the 4th one, I'm gonna get the 5th one just as the regular book and go through it, see kind of how it goes. I was more of a Redwall kid. Like I was my people dying were like stoats and rats and mice. Not real characters. And I don't think there hasn't been like a real. I think there is a Redwall like illustrated, but I'm not sure about graphic novel. And honestly, I'm not too sure, like, if that would translate today, like, if people would be into that, because, like, I'll be honest with you, Redwall was very, it was very singular. Like, I tried reading, I was like, a while back, I said, look, I can get all the Redwall books on my Kindle, or my device, and I can read all of them. And I read, like, the first 5, then I went in release order, not chronological in the world order, but release order. And I got through like 5 of them, and I said, I can't keep doing this, because they're all the same book. So, it's all the same things. There's prophecies. There's, there's big feasts. There's a big, mean rat / stoat / weasel / fox / whatever, wildcat, depending on what you're reading. There's a hero's journey. The hero has to go. There's trials and tribulations. We meet moles and they all get drunk. I don't know why the moles are always drunk, but they always are. I love me some moles. Moles and the hedgehogs. I think the moles are Australian and the hedgehogs are Scottish, I want to say. If you haven't read Redwall, it was written for blind kids. So the guy who wrote it gave all the various animals different accents. So I think there was an animated series at one point as well, but I don't know. It's not as good as this. These are really good graphic novels. If you haven't read the Animorph series, this might be a good introduction for you if you've ever been interested. If you are like me and you're like, oh, that terrible Photoshop thing is actually about like children fighting an interstellar war against the horrible creatures, but also they can transform into animals, and they're all getting post-traumatic stress. Maybe it's for you, and you can kind of open that up for yourself. So don't judge this book by its cover. It seems like it's a pretty cool thing in there. I have read stuff with Christina Apple, like I've read interviews with Christina Applegate afterwards, and apparently like some of the main characters die apparently throughout the entire series, and she's like, yeah, it's a fucking war. What do you want? People die in a war. Even a war like this. So, graphic novel wise, I'm really enjoying these. I'm enjoying those. If you have graphic novels that you think I might enjoy, I'm not into the superhero stuff, but I know that there's so many other things out there. I talked about reading Paper Girl. I read through not all of the Chainsaw Man manga, but I read through all of the Makima. If you're familiar with Chainsaw Man, the whole Makima arc, I've read through that, and I was kind of done. There's enough with that. So if you have anything, I'm sure that I have comic people out there. The other one I read that I really liked was We Only Find Them When They're Dead. So anything in those veins of like weird shit. Saga, I've been reading Saga off and on. So I want that kind of weird fantasy stuff, but like also gritty urbanism. I don't know. But send me your recommendations. I want to see what else is out there. All right, so our first reading is going to be from GI Fightback. Really, all the readings are going to be from GI Fightback. This is a newspaper for the movement of a democratic military out of Long Beach, California. A lot of California newspapers, but the MDM is a little bit different from the VVAW, which is the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. This is the MDM is more of a labor movement, labor union push for federal soldiers. Now, it is illegal for soldiers to join to form or join a union, not outside of the uniform, but in the uniform itself. So that's highly illegal. You can't do that. But that only was ratified in 1978. So at this point, because this is the early to mid 70s. None of that stuff has gone through. So this is a magazine that is a lot more about liberation and unionizing, organizing, and things like that. So our first one is called "Soldiers Elect Officers: The Way It Was in 1776." Officers elected by their troops, a democratic military fighting only for self-defense and their families of their country, long hair and civilian clothes while on active duty. Impossible, we've been told. An army like this could only lose. What is needed for an effective armed force is discipline, the blind following of arbitrary authority. 1776, 200 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This document proclaimed that all men are created equal and that they are endowed with certain inalienable rights, and that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Since soldiers and sailors today are among those who witnessed the more blatant examples of inequality at home and abroad, Stars and Stripes makes this small contribution to the U.S. bicentennial with some notes on the troops that fought the battles and won our independence. The armed forces during the American Revolution, 1775 to 1783, consisted of two types, the militia and the regular forces. The militia was a system derived from the military practice of the early English. All free men were trained and expected to defend the land. The training in the American colonies lasted from a few days to a few weeks, and the recruits were not to serve outside of their own colonies without their consent. They could not be called up for involuntary active duty for more than 3 months out of any year. Some officers were even elected. Except, of course, generals and field-grade officers, they were appointed by the colonial government. Then, as now, the wealthy had ways of avoiding military service. One common practice was to have black slaves and white indentured servants serve in their places of their rich masters. This method did help many to win their freedom. Officers of the militia tended to be wealthier than most of the men because they were required to buy their own uniforms and equipment. Nevertheless, there was not a deep division between officers and men in England. This was due to the level of democracy. Officers were elected every year and rotated on a regular basis. Decisions were made by a majority rule after open debates. Grievances were speedily redressed, and any officer found mistreating the soldiers would be replaced by a vote. Although women and African Americans were generally excluded, the system was very democratic for its time. The more powerful land and slave owners in the colonies, like George Washington, distrusted the people's militia, calling them incompetent and unreliable. On the other hand, the idea of a standing army was very unpopular because of the experience with the British occupation forces. Therefore, volunteers were established. These men signed up for long enlistments, usually 3 years or so, first used to fight the Native American wars and the, quote, Indian wars on the frontier. The volunteers were not popular, and many colonial governors opposed them. Though not careerists, for the most part, the volunteers were separate from the people. Out of a total American force of 200,000, General George Washington commanded only 20,000. His attempt to impose an aristocratic European style of command met resistance, and major mutinies had to be quelled along the Pennsylvania and New Jersey troops. This is not surprising because, all of these people are really British at heart. That's how they started. Like, we love to tell ourselves George Washington was this, full-blooded American, but he wasn't some scrappy underdog from, the story that we like to tell ourselves, the scrappy underdog general who came from nothing and rose up the ranks or whatever. He, was a rich slave-owning asshole, and he didn't like the fact that a bunch of, dudes that spent their time scrabbling around in the dirt and couldn't read would ever have the ability to elect an officer. So officers gonna officer. Much like a lot of terrible things from our past that have been brought forward in new and disgusting ways, the officership, the way that we used to do officers coming forward and doing the same thing. At least now you only have to get a degree in underwater basket weaving and you can become an officer, I guess. The bulk of the Revolutionary Force were people's militia, which, unlike Washington's army, fought guerrilla warfare learned from the Indians. It was primarily this group of badly organized and ill-equipped Americans that was able to defeat the most powerful country in the world. The victory of the Americans became an inspiration to the democratic rights struggles both in Europe and across the colonies throughout the world. We won freedom because we voted for our officers. I don't think that that's the full thing that this guy is going for, but that last paragraph really makes it seem just who's to say? Who's to say that George Washington, didn't almost dick everything up by not letting people be elected to be officers, I guess. But also the guerrilla style warfare and everything was a very the British people loved to stand. British soldiers stand in a line with very red coats and shoot at each other, and the Americans got behind a tree. Incredible that I don't think that's in Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Get behind a fucking tree, but somebody should put it in there. Right in between if you're near, you should make your enemy believe you're far away or whatever. Hide behind it. So the second part is going to be probably our 2 and our 3 kind of rolled into one. So as I mentioned, the GI Fightback was published in Long Beach, California. In Long Beach, there was also a weekly or a newspaper that was put out that was the Independent Press Telegram. Currently, it's just the Press Telegram, but it does still exist. It was existing back then. And so there was an article which names a few of the movements that I've talked about before, and so they printed it, and then they print their own response to it. So the first part we're going to do is from the Independent Press Telegram, and it's entitled, LB Group Had Part in Sabotage of Armed Forces. New York, Associated Press. 2 U.S. Marines and a Navy seaman deserted in Japan in 1968 and were spirited secretly by train, plane, and boat to the Soviet Union. Philippines police seized documents in a raid on a shanty town near Subic Bay in 1972 that suggested local American GI anti-war groups were working with Filipino Communist Front organizations. An American couple encouraged 100 sailors from the U.S. aircraft carrier Midway to refuse to sail from its home port in Japan in 1974 on grounds of poor conditions aboard the ship. Disgruntled sailors on a destroyer based in Charleston, South Carolina were advised by an anti-Vietnam war group in 1975 that seamen on a sister ship expressed their unhappiness by tossing charts and tools overboard. These incidents were cited in a report by the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee as examples of a, quote, systematic effort to spread disaffection in our armed forces, end quote. Committee sources say the report could be released in Washington this week. The Associated Press obtained a copy of the report. The report covers secret hearings last September presided over by Senator Strom Thurmond. Ugh, that fucking ghoul. The report covers secret hearings last September presided over by Senator Strom Thurmond. My own editorial note, noted ghoul, Strom Thurmond. Fuck him. If you don't know who Strom Thurmond is, look him up. Go be disgusted by this man who was such a racist piece of shit, and in South Carolina refused to let him go. We had to scrape his carcass out of the fucking chair. Anyway. Its release comes at the time when the Senate Rules Committee is debating whether to withhold funds from the Internal Security Subcommittee. Thurmond said that he convened the hearing because of, quote, mounting evidence of organized subversion and sabotage of the armed forces, end quote. He charged that, in open defiance of the law, revolutionary organizations in the United States have, for a number of years, been engaged in a systematic effort to create disaffection in the armed forces. He named several groups, including the Lawyers Military Defense Committee, the Movement for a Democratic Military in Long Beach, the Vietnam Veterans Against the War, Winter Soldier Organization, and the National Lawyers Guild. He characterized the National Lawyers Guild as, quote, a catch-all organization for young radical lawyers of all Marxist tendencies, end quote. U.S. Navy investigators, in committee testimony, linked several of these organizations to shipboard unrest and disciplinary problems during the Vietnam War and charged that U.S. civilian fomented subversive activities against the military is a continuing problem confronting military commanders throughout the world. However, one investigator told the committee that this observable assault against the military arm of the United States government has dramatically decreased during the last few months when much of their base of support was removed with the termination of hostilities in Vietnam. So this is post-Vietnam. This is 1975, but still very fresh post-Vietnam. The 3 U.S. military deserters in Japan in 1968 were aided by the Japanese anti-Vietnam war group called Behirin. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Navy investigators testified. They said that they provided all 3 with safe houses in Japan and allegedly moved them by fishing boat to a rendezvous with a Soviet naval vessel at a prearranged spot on the high seas. All 3 later voluntarily returned to the United States. Not surprised. So that's the end of just the piece from the Independent Press Telegram. Long Beach Group had part in sabotage of armed forces. So this is, and it's not surprising that they are, basically it's just throwing like, look, all these anti-war zines are the problem. They just happen to get themselves called out. So the response, MDM responds to IPT lies. No, the Independent Press Telegram does not shirk the truth, as they claim in the above article. They just lie outright. A front-page story printed February 19th has the following headline: LB Group had part in sabotage of armed forces. This is one of the most blatant misrepresentations of the fact that we have seen in a long time. Needless to say, MDM took prompt action in an attempt to counter this libelous act. Within the legal limit, we sent a letter to the IPT demanding a printed retraction. After waiting a week with no response, we sent a second letter, the conclusion of which reads as followed. We again must repeat our demand for a full retraction. This retraction, according to the California Civil Code, Section 48A, should appear in the same prominent location on page 1 and use the same type size and heading of that of the original article. In this way, we would have the means of refuting these lies and distortions. They are in fact gross misrepresentations because there is no mention in the subcommittee report of any proof that MDM was involved in any of the, quote, sabotage, end quote, activities, or any of the other actions that were in open defiance of the law. This action on part of both the Associated Press and the IPT is a clear example of the slanderous style of journalism usually found in cheaper sensationalist newspapers. At this time, our lawyers notified the IPT that if a retraction was not forthcoming, MDM would file a $1 million lawsuit. The newspaper still refuses our demands. We have, by law, up to 1 year to present our case in court. However, we also felt a responsibility to present the case to the people and expose the Independent Press Telegram's attempt of verbal sabotage of the MDM. It should be pointed out that although the story was written by the Associated Press News Service, the headline was written by the IPT, and both are legally responsible. Let us examine the article more closely. In the second column, third paragraph, Senator Strom Thurmond was quoted giving the following reasons for holding the secret hearings. Quote, mounting evidence of organized subversion and sabotage of the armed forces, end quote. But the editors of the Associated Press seemed to take Senator Thurmond at his word. A man who, as most everyone knows, has been a titan of racism and reactionaryism in the Senate for many years. 100%. Nowhere in the article is there even a trickle of this alleged evidence connecting MDM. The only Long Beach group listened. We obtained a copy of the report, which is slanderous in its own right, and nowhere in the entire report is MDM mentioned in regards to sabotage or any other criminal activities. Next in the article is the clear insinuation that MDM, along with the other groups listed, were involved in a systematic effort to create disaffection in the armed forces. Aside from the fact that this is a far cry from sabotage, the military itself, through its own policy of dehumanization, creates the disaffection. Groups like MDM work to help organize the so-called disaffected enlisted people in order to further the struggle to democratize the armed forces and help defend the basic and human constitutional rights. There is no more illegal than the United Farm Workers Union struggle to organize the farm workers. Like the farm workers, before them they had a union. Rank-and-file enlisted people are used and exploited as a cheap source of labor. They are the working class of the military. To suggest that our work is somehow un-American is to suggest the same in regards to the entire labor movement of this country. The third column, second paragraph, says that, quote, testimony links several of these organizations to shipboard unrest and disciplinary problems, end quote. This again is an attempt to shift the blame and shirk the truth. The growing opposition to the imperialist wars, blatantly racist and sexist attitudes that thrive in the military system of injustice, and a whole host of unsafe and unhealthy living and working conditions on board the ship have been the real cause of any widespread resentment. It would seem that a newspaper purporting to be in favor of a free press would have the policy of attempting to contact these groups listed so that their response to the report could have been included into the article. It is in this way that the readership would have had a much more objective basis from which to draw their own conclusions. It takes more than words and empty rhetoric to make a free press. We in MDM urge the owners of the Independent Press Telegram to study the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights before they continue to advertise the IPT as having any connection with the free press. They may end up in court with false advertising charges as well. So, I want to say I get it. 100%. I get it. I understand being pissed off. At the same time, I would think like, ooh, we're getting a little bit of press coverage here. But, one, yes, they're just reprinting exactly what Strom Thurmond says without any pushback. And yes, they should have made some kind of connection, some kind of outreach to like these organizations that have been named in this report. But they're literally just saying, look, these things are in the report. They mention you guys because they are a Long Beach group. Like this is 100% because the headline makes it sexy and is going to make people put eyeballs on it, which is shitty. It's not good journalism for sure. But I don't think that there was any that there wasn't anything malicious. I don't believe about this. Not malicious against a person, malicious in general in the way that capitalism itself is malicious, and they're doing this specifically to get more eyeballs, to get more people to pick up their newspaper and buy stuff. So. All right, so that was GI Fightback. There's a couple of them in here. I picked this one because it's got a big, instead of the eagle, it has a turkey and it's grimacing at you. And instead of bicentennial, it says licentennial. I'm a big fan of changing words around, but making them still rhyme. I'll have a screenshot up there for you. You should take a look at it. And we will kind of dive back into these. I like the unionized guys in the military. I think they really had a good thing going. And of course, because it was a good thing going, immediately the government had to make it illegal, which like kind of goes against the whole like thing of how a union works and representation works. But it's fine. It's whatever. The National Guard still can unionize. You guys are fine. Just you can't unionize on federal time, but your state time, absolutely. All right, everybody, that does it for this week. Thank you for listening. This week on the show we have This coming up. Last week we had I had Brian from Guys, formerly Street Fight Radio, come on to do a dad chat with me. That was really enjoyable. We also have on the bonus 33rd County. That is Carrie and Irish Tom, our producer. Carrie is a Bostonian Irish American, and Tom is an Irishman. So they're kind of talking about the cultural divide. So anyway, Carrie made Tom watch Boondock Saints, and that's a terrible fucking movie. We've covered it ourselves, but apparently Tom had never seen it. So Tom has now seen it. It's a terrible movie, but that's out on the bonus as well. Also, I just want to highlight in the store. These guys, if you have not seen me talk about them on Twitter or anywhere else, these are Yip Yip Martians from Sesame Street. My wife makes them, she crochets them, and then she found this kind of dusky this color, and she said, I said, you should make Yip Yips out, make some of your Yip Yips. She makes them out of all different colors. They're bags, they're not hats, do not try to put them on your head. But I said, look, you can absolutely make that into a tactical Yip Yip. So if you need a new range bag or maybe a range accessory, these guys are a perfect bag for that. Those are over on the website. It's a goofy little thing that my wife makes and people buy them. We actually just had a vendor event that we were a part of last week, where she sold a bunch of these, of her other colors. So if you're interested, we have these on the website. I have the link down there. But as always, please, if you don't have the money or don't want to give me money, but you still like me, feel free to like, subscribe, share with your friends. We do a lot of word of mouth. That's how we get a lot of our engagement here. And if you have an idea, if there's anything that you think you want to see on the show, maybe that thing you want to see on the show is yourself. Look, Nate is still on parental leave. I've got to fucking fill content somewhere, guys. So if you're a dad or if you're a troop, you think you might want to come on, Sergeant Joker at hellofawaytodie.com. You can always DM me on Twitter at ArmyStrang, or you can message me somewhere. There's so many places that you can message me. Don't leave comments down in the thing about wanting to do anything. Just message me because I don't want to have those conversations out in the open. But hit us up. Love to hear from you, and we'll talk to you next week.